Yo, what's good, epic adventurers? Welcome back to the channel, where we dive into history's grandest legends with stories that flow like a river of steel. If you're new, hit that like button. If you're hungry for tales of rulers and realms, smash subscribe to join the journey, and drop a comment. Where are you watching from today? The deserts of Persia, the mountains of Macedon, or dreaming of glory from your cozy nook? Your tales stoke the flames, share them with us. Today, we launch a fresh series, Alexander the Great, the Thunder of the East, an 11-chapter saga plus conclusion tracing the life of the youth who rose to godlike stature. From Pella's halls to the Indus banks, well charged through his ascent, wars, and enduring mark. Grab your shield, and let's ride. Picture the sun-baked hills of Macedon, where olive groves sway under a sky as blue as the Aegean, and a boy's cry echoes from Pella's royal palace in 356 BCE. Born Alexander, son of King Philippi and Queen Olympias, he was no ordinary prince, he was a storm in human form. Destined to conquer from Greece to India, forging an empire larger than any before, only to die at 32, his dream unfinished. His saga isn't just war, it's a whirlwind of genius, divinity, and tragedy that reshaped the world, blending Greek phalanxes with Persian gold. Over 11 chapters plus a conclusion, we'll follow his path from lion cub to world shaker, drawing from Plutarch, Arrian's Anabasis, and the secret history fragments, uncovering the man behind the myth. Alexander's world was a cauldron of ambition. Macedon, a rugged kingdom of shepherds and warriors, was Philip's forge uniting Greek city-states under his Sarissa phalanx, a spear wall 16 feet long. Olympias, a Epirote princess with a taste for Dionysus, claimed Zeus as his father, his birth marked by an earthquake and a temple's collapse, omens of thunder. At 13, Aristotle tutored him in Iliad verses and philosophy, his mind a blade sharpened by logic and Homer's heroes. By 20, Philip's assassination, perhaps Olympias' hand thrust him to the throne, his first act crushing Thebes in 335 BCE. Its streets a river of blood, 6,000 crucified as warning. The conquests were ablaze. In 334 BCE, Granicus River saw Persian satraps fall, their armor shattered by Macedonian bronze. Issus in 333 BCE trapped Darius III, Alexander's cavalry smashing the Persian center, the king fleeing in his chariot. Tyre in 330 BCE fell for a 7-month siege, its island walls breached by a mole of rubble, the city burned, 8,000 crucified. Egypt hailed him Pharaoh, the oracle at Siwa whispering son of Zeus Ammon. Gaza, Tyre's sister, resisted its governor Batis chained Alexander's feet, earning crucifixion alive. The East beckoned. Gaugamela in 330 1 BCE crushed Darius to 100,000, Alexander's phalanx a spearhead through the Persian line, the king fleeing again. Persepolis burned in 330 BCE, its palaces a pyre for Xerxes Athens, the air thick with smoke and revenge. India called. The Hydaspes in 326 BCE saw Pyrrhus elephants charge, Alexander's Sarissus piercing hides, the river red with blood. But his men mutinied at the Hyphasis, their feet blistered, hearts homesick. The world is ours, Alexander wept, turning back. His death in 323 BCE, at 32 in Babylon, was a riddle: fever, poison, or exhaustion, his body embalmed in honey, his empire fracturing among the Diadochi. His legacy: a Hellenistic world, Greek cities in Bactria, libraries in Alexandria, the East forever changed. But his shadow lingers, 100,000 dead at Tyre, 1 million across Asia. His dream a ghost. Was he Zeus' son or man's ambition? In this series, we'll march through his life: Pella's prince, Persian breaker, Indian storm. What's your take on Alexander, god or mortal? Drop it in the comments, and let's march to chapter 1, where a boy tames Bucephalus. The hills of Macedon, stretched wide, under a sky deep and endless. The year 356 BCE, whispering through the olive groves, where Pella, the royal palace, stood proud, its stone walls, warmed by the Aegean sun. A cry pierced the air, soft yet fierce, as Alexander, son of King Philip and Queen Olympias, entered the world, a boy, destined to shake the earth. The palace hummed, with the rustle of servants, the clink of bronze, and the distant bleat of goats grazing the slopes. Olympias, a woman of Epirus, with eyes like storm clouds, cradled her son, her hands trembling. With a mother's pride, she whispered to the flickering lamps that Zeus, god of thunder, had visited her, his lightning igniting her womb. The night of his birth, an earthquake rumbled, the ground trembling, and the temple collapsed, its marble shards scattering like stars. The priest murmured of omens, of a child born to rule beyond mortal bounds. Philip, a warrior king, with a scarred face and a mind for conquest, rode in from battle, his horse lathered, its hooves kicking dust. He entered the chamber, the air thick with incense and sweat, and gazed upon Alexander, his eyes narrowing, as if seeing a rival, a lion cub. He grunted, his voice rough, like the clash of shields, yet pride flickered in his gaze, for this boy was his blood, his future. The palace, a labyrinth of corridors, echoed with life. Tapestries hung, their threads worn, depicting heroes of old. The nursery, small and warm, held a cradle, carved from oak, its wood smooth. Under Olympia's touch, she sang a lullaby, low and haunting, the words lost to the wind, but the tune, a thread, connecting mother and son. Outside, the Macedonian hills rolled green, dotted with sheep. They were catching the light. The air carried the scent of time and the salty breath of the sea. Beyond the horizon, Alexander, swaddled in linen, slept, his tiny fists clenched, as if gripping the world to come. Olympias watched, her shadow dancing on the wall, the fire's glow, a soft embrace. Years passed, slow and steady, and Alexander grew, a boy of wild spirit, his hair, golden as the sun, fell in curls, framing a face, sharp and fierce. At 5, he roamed the palace gardens, the grass cool, under his sandals, chasing butterflies, their wings a flash of color. The servants smiled, their voices soft, calling him the little king. One day, a horse arrived, a gift from Thessaly, black as midnight, its eyes wild, its name, Bucephalus, meaning ox head. Philip led the court to the courtyard, the stones warm, under the sun. Tame him, he challenged, his voice a command. The nobles laughed, their cloaks rustling, for no man had mastered the beast. Alexander stepped forward, his small frame steady, his gaze locked on the horse. The animal reared, its hooves flashing, the air thick with dust. The boy circled, slow and sure, then whispered, his voice lost to the wind. He noticed the horse shied from its shadow and turned it toward the sun. The court fell silent, their breaths held, as Alexander mounted, his hands firm on the reins. Bucephalus calmed, its breath slowing, its muscles easing under the boy's touch. Philip watched, his jaw tightening, then broke into a grin. "My son," he roared, his voice echoing, "rules men and beasts." The nobles cheered, their voices a wave, and Olympia smiled, her eyes gleaming with pride and something deeper, a prophecy unfolding. The palace grew with Alexander's steps, the floors worn by his wanderings. He sought the stables, the straw soft under his feet, and sat with Bucephalus, his hand stroking the horse's mane. The bond grew, a silent pact forged in trust. The air hummed with the sound of hooves and the distant sea. At night, the palace quieted, the stars peering through the windows. Olympias told tales, her voice low, of Achilles and Hector, heroes of Troy. Alexander listened, his eyes wide, the firelight dancing across his face. "I will be greater," he murmured, his voice a whisper, lost in the flames. Aristotle came, a scholar from Stagira, his robes dusty, his mind a treasure. At 13, Alexander sat on a bench, the wood hard under him, learning of logic and poetry. The Iliad became his guide, its pages worn by his fingers. He dreamed of glory, the words fueling his young heart. The hills beyond whispered of war, Philip's campaigns echoing in the distance. The clatter of spears, the shouts of men reached Pella, a faint drumbeat. Alexander watched from the ramparts, the wine tugging at his cloak. His mother's voice lingered. You are no man's son, but a god's. And he believed, the thunder in his soul stirring. The palace slept, the night deep, the stars a canopy. Over Macedon, Alexander lay, his bed creaking softly, the blanket rough against his skin. He dreamed of horses, of battles, of a world bending to his will. The lion cub grew, his breath steady, the future a shadow waiting to rise. The sea murmured, its voice a lullaby, and the palace stood, a sentinel under the sky. Alexander's story began here, in Pella's heart, a boy, a dream, a thunder yet to break. All right, let's move on to chapter 2. Lessons of the horse and sword. Young Alexander's trials. For the Alexander the Great, the Thunder of the East series on Liam O'Connor's Sleep Stories. This chapter will be expanded to 15-18 minutes to 0002300 words at 130 words a min, with a smooth, soothing narrative flow to maintain the restful yet engaging tone. Building on Alexander's early life, the story focuses on his training, challenges, and growth under Philip and Aristotle. The current date and time is 1:35 p.m. CEST, Wednesday, September 24, 2025, but the text will remain timeless. Sleep Story Chapter to Lessons of the Horse and Sword. Young Alexander's Trials. Duration 15-18 minutes, 20,002,300 words. The sun rose over the Macedonian hills, casting a golden glow across Pella's palace as Alexander stepped into his 13th year. The air was thick with the scent of olive trees and the distant bleat of goats, a quiet morning broken by the clatter of wooden swords in the courtyard. Philip, his father, stood tall, his armor scarred from campaigns, overseeing the young prince's first lessons in war. Alexander gripped a practice spear, its weight unfamiliar in his hands, his golden curls damp with sweat as he faced a trainer twice his size. The court watched, nobles murmuring, their voices a soft hum, as the boy moved with a grace that belied his age. Philip's voice rang out, firm and commanding, strike true, or fall. The trainer lunged, his wooden blade whistling through the air, and Alexander parried, his arms trembling but his eyes sharp. The clash echoed, a rhythm of wood on wood, as he ducked and thrust, his movements guided by instinct rather than skill. A blow landed on his shoulder, sharp and stinging, and he stumbled, the ground hard beneath his sandals. Philip frowned, his scarred face hardening, but nodded. Again he barked, and Alexander rose, his breath steadying, a fire kindling in his chest. The lesson was harsh, the days long, but each bruise taught him the dance of battle. Beyond the courtyard, the stables called. Bucephalus, the black stallion, stood restless, his mane rippling in the breeze, his eyes wild yet trusting. Alexander spent hours there, the straw crunching under his feet, the air warm with the scent of hay. He brushed the horse's coat, his hands gentle, feeling the muscle shift beneath the skin. You and I, he whispered, will see the world. The bond deepened, a silent pact forged in the quiet moments, away from the clash of training. Philip noticed, his approval a rare smile, and soon Alexander rode. The horses gallop a thunder across the plains, the wind whipping through his hair. Aristotle arrived that year, a scholar from Stagira, his robes dusty from the road, his voice a calm river of wisdom. The lessons moved to a shaded grove, the leaves rustling overhead, the ground soft with moss. Alexander sat on a stone bench, the wood cool against his legs, listening as the philosopher unrolled scrolls of Homer and Plato. A king must think, Aristotle said, his tone measured, not just fight. The boy absorbed it all, his mind a sponge, reciting the Iliad's verses, imagining himself as Achilles, his spear piercing Hector's shield. The grove became a sanctuary, the air filled with the scent of earth and ink, a contrast to the battlefield's dust. Trials tested him. At 14, Philip sent him to oversee a herd of horses, a task to build responsibility. The hills were steep, the grass coarse under his boots, and a storm brewed, the sky darkening with clouds. Alexander led the herd, his voice steady over the thunder, the rain soaking his cloak. A mare bolted, her hooves slipping on mud, and he chased, his heart pounding, until he caught her rein, his hands raw from the effort. The court praised him, but Philip's eyes held a challenge. A king protects, not just commands. The lesson sank deep, a seed of leadership taking root. Rivalries stirred. His cousin Omintus, older and taller, taunted him in the training yard, his laughter sharp as he bested Alexander in a mock duel. The prince fell, the ground jarring his bones, and the nobles chuckled, their cloaks swaying. But Alexander rose, his jaw set, and trained harder, his sword strokes growing precise, his entrance a quiet defiance. Olympias watched from the palace balcony, her eyes narrowing, whispering to her maids of Amyntas' threat. She fueled Alexander's fire, her words a whisper of destiny. You are no common blood. The palace nights were filled with stories. Olympias gathered him by the hearth, its flames casting shadows on the stone walls, the air warm with the scent of burning cedar. She spoke of Zeus, his thunder shaking the earth, and of her dream where an eagle perched on his cradle, a sign of divine favor. Alexander listened, his eyes reflecting the fire, his mind weaving tales of glory. The servants moved quietly, their footsteps soft, as the palace settled into sleep. The distant sea a lullaby beyond the hills. One evening, a festival lit Pella with torches, their flames dancing in the night. Philip led a procession, his crown glinting, while Alexander rode Bucephalus, the horses stride proud, the crowd cheering. A bard sang of Heracles, Macedon's ancestor, his voice rising over the lyres, and Alexander felt the weight of lineage, his shoulders straightening. But a shadow fell Philip's drunken stumble, a guard's jest about his conquests, and Alexander's face darkened. He stumbles, he muttered, while I will stand. The lessons continued. Aristotle taught strategy, drawing maps in the dirt with a stick, the lines tracing Persia's vastness. Alexander studied, his fingers tracing the curves, imagining armies marching, cities falling. Philip drilled him in tactics, the phalanx's formation a wall of spears, and Alexander mastered it, his commands crisp, his men responding. The hills echoed with their drills, the air thick with the clang of metal, a symphony of preparation. His trials shaped him. A winter hunt saw him lost in the forest, the trees bare, the cold biting his skin. He tracked a deer, his bow drawn, the string taut, and felled it, the arrow finding its mark. The meat fed his men, their gratitude a quiet bond, and he returned, his cloak muddied, his spirit unbroken. Olympias greeted him, her embrace warm, her voice soft. The gods watch you. The palace grew quiet as night fell, the stars peering through the windows, their light a guide. Alexander lay in his bed, the blankets rough against his skin, his mind racing with dreams, horses, battles, a throne. The sea murmured in the distance, its rhythm a lullaby, and the palace stood, a fortress of his youth, where the lion cub learned to roar. His trials were many, but his heart was steel, forged in the fires of Macedon, ready for the world beyond. The Macedonian sun hung low over Pella, its golden rays spilling across the palace walls, warming the stone as Alexander approached his 17th year. The air carried the scent of olive oil and the distant clang of hammers, where Philip smiths forged spears for the growing army. The king stood in the throne room, his armor gleaming with fresh polish, his scarred face set in a determined line. Alexander watched from the shadows, his heart a mix of pride and unease, for Philip's shadow loomed large, a legacy of conquest that both inspired and burdened him. The palace hummed with the murmur of courtiers, their voices soft as the weight of a kingdom pressed down. Philip was a builder of empires, his hands calloused from war, his mind a strategist's forge. At 46, he had united the fractious Greek city-states under the League of Corinth, his Sarissa phalanx a wall of steel that crushed resistance. The Battle of Chaeronea in 338 BCE echoed in Alexander's ears, where at 18 he led the cavalry, his charge breaking Theban lines, the ground slick with blood. Philip praised him that night, his voice rough with wine. "You ride like a god," but his eyes held a flicker of rivalry. The palace feasted, the air thick with the aroma of roasted lamb, yet tension simmered beneath the revelry. Olympias fueled the rift, her presence a storm in the women's quarters. She spoke of Philip's infidelities, his new wife Cleopatra, a Macedonian noble, whose child might displace Alexander. Her voice was a whisper by the hearth, the flames casting shadows on the tapestries. "He weakens your claim." Alexander listened, his jaw tightening, the fire's crackle a counterpoint to his thoughts. He loved his father, admired his victories Olynthus raised, Thrace subdued, but the throne felt closer with each campaign, a prize he both coveted and feared to seize. The palace training grounds became a battleground of wills. Philip drilled the army, his commands sharp, the clash of shields a steady beat. Alexander joined, his spear steady, his phalanx maneuvers precise, earning nods from the grizzled officers. But Philip's critique stung. "You rush, boy," his voice cutting through the dust. Alexander bit back, his temper flaring, and once threw down his shield, the metal clanging on stone. The court gasped, their breaths held, but Philip laughed, a deep rumble. "That fire will serve you." The lesson was clear: respect, but never submission. Beyond Pella, Philip's ambitions grew. He planned an invasion of Persia, the vast empire of Darius III, its wealth a law, its cities a challenge. The war council met in a hall of marble, the air cool, the map spread on a table worn by years of planning. Alexander sat at his father's side, his fingers tracing the Euphrates, his mind racing with strategies. Philip outlined the campaign, his voice steady. "Well cross the Hellespont, strike at the heart." Alexander offered a suggestion, his tone measured, and Philip's nod was grudging, a king acknowledging a prince's mind. Tensions peaked at a wedding feast. Cleopatra bore a son, and Philip, drunk on wine, declared the child his heir. The hall roared with cheers, the clink of goblets a sharp sound, but Alexander rose, his face pale, his voice low. "Am I a bastard then?" The words hung heavy, the air thickening with silence. Philip staggered to his feet, his hand on his sword, and lunged, only to trip, falling in a heap. The court froze, their breaths shallow, and Alexander left, his cloak sweeping the floor, Olympias' eyes gleaming with triumph. The palace knights grew restless. Alexander retreated to the stables, Bucephalus' breath warm against his hand, the horse's mane soft under his fingers. He whispered plans, his voice a murmur, the straw crunching beneath him. Olympias visited, her robes rustling, her words a poison. "Hell cast you out." The fire in his soul burned brighter, a mix of love and defiance, as he dreamed of surpassing his father's shadow. Philip's campaigns continued, the army marching north, the hills echoing with the tramp of boots. Alexander stayed, overseeing Pella, his commands crisp, his men loyal. A messenger returned, his cloak muddied, reporting victories Illyria subdued, the Danube crossed. Philip's letters praised him, the ink smudged, but Alexander felt the weight of expectation, the throne a shadow he could not escape. The palace walls seemed to close in, the tapestry's heroes watching, their silence a challenge. One evening, a storm rolled in, the thunder shaking the palace, the rain lashing the windows. Alexander stood on the balcony, the wind tugging his cloak, the sea beyond the dark expanse. Philip joined him, his face softened by the rain, and spoke, his voice low, "You'll go further than I." The words were a bridge, fragile but real, and Alexander nodded, the rain washing away the tension. The palace settled, the storm a lullaby, the king and prince bound by ambition. The court whispered of plots, Olympias hinted at assassins, her voice a hiss by the hearth, the flames casting shadows on her face. Alexander trained harder, his sword strokes precise, his body lean and strong. The phalanx drills grew intense, the air thick with sweat and steel, his men following his lead. Philip returned, his victories a crown, but his health waned, his steps slower, his breath labored. The palace grew quiet as night fell, the stars peeking through the storm clouds, their light a guide. Alexander lay in his bed, the blankets rough against his skin, his mind turning with plans Persia, glory, a legacy beyond his father. The sea murmured in the distance, its rhythm a comfort, and the palace stood, a fortress of his youth, where the shadow of Philip shaped a prince into a king. His ambition stirred, a thunder waiting to break. The Macedonian night lay heavy over Pella, the stars hidden behind a veil of clouds, the air thick with the scent of rain-soaked earth. It was 336 BCE, and the palace stood silent, its stone walls echoing with a sudden cry that shattered the stillness. Philip lay dead, his body sprawled in the theatre, a dagger in his back, the assassin Pausanias fleeing into the dark. Alexander, now 20, stood in the throne room, his heart pounding, his golden hair damp with sweat, as the court turned to him. The weight of the crown settled on his shoulders, a burden and a promise, the palace a fortress of uncertainty and ambition. Olympias moved swiftly, her robes rustling like leaves in a storm, her voice a whisper of command. She claimed Pausanias acted alone, a spurned lover, but rumors swirled of her hand, her jealousy of Cleopatra's son a motive whispered in the corridors. Alexander listened, his jaw tight, the air thick with incense as priests chanted prayers for Philip's soul. The nobles gathered, their cloaks swaying, their eyes wary, and he stepped forward, his voice steady. "I am your king." The hall fell silent, the crackle of torches the only sound, as he claimed the throne, his father's blood a shadow on the marble floor. The first days were a storm of action. Rebellions flared, Thrace rose, Illyria threatened, and the Greek city-states, bound by the League of Corinth, tested his resolve. Alexander rode out, Bucephalus hooves thundering across the plains, the wind whipping his cloak. At Thebes, he struck hard, the city's walls breached, its streets a chaos of screams, 6,000 dead, 30,000 enslaved. The message was clear: obey or fall. The palace received him with cheers, the air filled with the scent of victory wine, but his eyes held a distant look, the crown a heavier weight with each triumph. He sought legitimacy beyond steel. In 330 to BCE, he turned south, crossing the desert sands toward Egypt, the sun a relentless glare, the air dry and biting. His army marched, the clink of armor a steady rhythm, the camels groaning under the heat. The Nile's banks offered respite, its waters cool against his hands, and the people hailed him, their voices a wave of relief. Memphis crowned him pharaoh, the priests draping him in linen, the gold of the double crown glinting. But his journey led deeper, to the oracle of Siwa. The desert stretched endless, the sand shifting under his sandals, the horizon a shimmering mirage. His companions, weary, murmured of madness, the wind carrying their doubts. But Alexander pressed on, Bucephalus stepped sure. The temple of Zeus Amin rose from the dunes, its columns weathered, its silence a sacred hush. The priests emerged, their robes white, their faces shadowed, and led him into the inner sanctum, the air cool, the scent of myrrh thick. He knelt, the stone hard beneath his knees, and asked, "Am I the son of Zeus?" The oracle's voice was a whisper, carried on the breeze, "You are my son." The words sank deep, a divine seal on his claim, and Alexander rose, his heart swelling, the temple's echo a confirmation. His companions bowed, their breaths held, the sand outside glowing under the setting sun. He emerged, his face alight, the desert a witness to his destiny, the palace of his mind now a throne of gods. Back in Egypt, he founded Alexandria, its plans drawn on papyrus, the Nile's flow a lifeline. The air hummed with the sound of hammers, the city a dream of Greek stone and Egyptian soul. He sacrificed to the gods, the smoke rising, the priests chanting, and the people followed, their loyalty a tide. The palace messengers brought news. Persia loomed, Darius gathering forces, but Alexander's gaze was inward, the oracle's words a shield against doubt. The nights in Egypt were warm, the stars bright above the Nile, their light reflecting on the water. He sat by a campfire, the flames casting shadows on his face, the army resting, their snores a soft chorus. Olympia's letters arrived, her ink smudged, urging him to trust no one. Her fears an echo of Pella. He read, the papyrus crinkling, and felt the weight of her love, a chain and a strength. The desert wind whispered, a lullaby of sand and sky. His army grew restless, the desert's silence a contrast to the battlefield's roar. He trained them, the phalanx's spears a forest of bronze, the air thick with the clash of practice. A soldier fell, his cry sharp, and Alexander knelt, his hands steadying the man, his voice calm, rest now. The act bound them, a king who led, not just ruled, the camp's firelight a witness to his care. The oracle's blessing fueled his dreams. He lay in his tent, the canvas rustling, the blankets rough against his skin, imagining Persia's fall, India's rivers, a world bent to his will. The Nile's murmur blended with the desert wind, a rhythm that lulled him, the palace of his youth a memory, the throne a reality. His companions, Ptolemy and Hephaestion, sat nearby, their voices low, their laughter a comfort, the bond of youth a shield. A storm brewed as they prepared to leave, the thunder rolling, the rain a sudden deluge, the sand turning to mud. Alexander stood, the water soaking his cloak, his eyes on the horizon, the oracle's voice in his mind. The army marched, the ground soft under their feet, the air alive with the scent of wet earth. The palace of Egypt faded, its temples a silhouette, and he rode Bucephalus, the horse's stride a promise, the crown a light in the storm. The journey north began, the desert giving way to green hills, the air cooling, the sea's breath returning. He planned, his mind a map, the oracle's words a guide. The palace of his father was gone, but the throne was his, the shadow of Philip lifted, replaced by a divine mantle. The night deepened, the stars emerging, their light a path, and Alexander rested, the thunder of his destiny a lullaby, the world waiting beyond. The dawn broke over the rugged mountains of Persia, the sky a pale blush against the jagged peaks, the air crisp with the scent of pine and dust. It was 330 BCE, and Alexander led his army through the narrow pass of the Persian gates, a defile guarded by Darius' IIIS forces, their banners fluttering in the breeze. The young king rode Bucephalus, his cloak swaying, his eyes scanning the cliffs where the enemy waited, their silence a heavy cloak. The ground crunched under the army's boots, the clink of armor a soft rhythm, as the campaign against the Persian Empire began, a dance of steel and strategy under a vast, watchful sky. The Persian gates loomed, a natural fortress with steep walls rising on either side, the path barely wide enough for a phalanx. Darius had entrusted the defense to Ariobarzanes, a satrap with 40,000 men, their spears glinting, their arrows notched. Alexander dismounted, the earth cool beneath his sandals, and studied the terrain, his mind a map of moves and counters. His companions, Ptolemy and Hephaestion, stood nearby, their breaths visible in the morning chill, their voices low as they planned. The air hummed with tension, the distant cry of an eagle alone note in the stillness. The battle opened with a feint. Alexander sent a detachment forward, their shields raised, the clash of bronze against bronze echoing off the cliffs. Ariobarzanes struck, his archers loosing a rain of arrows, the air whistling with their flight, the ground littered with shafts. The Macedonians fell back, their retreat orderly, the dust rising like a veil, luring the Persians into a trap. Alexander watched, his heart steady, the strategy unfolding like a scroll in his mind, the palace of his youth a distant memory, replaced by the field of war. Night fell, the stars peeking through the clouds, their light faint on the rocky pass. Alexander summoned scouts, their cloaks muddied, their faces weary, and listened as they spoke of a hidden path, a goat trail winding above the Persian lines. He chose a small force, their steps silent on the stones, the air cool against their skin, and led them upward, the slope steep, the wind tugging at their cloaks. Bucephalus stayed below, his whinny a soft farewell, the bond a silent strength as Alexander climbed. The ascent was grueling, the rocks sharp under his hands, the night deep, the only sound the rustle of leaves and the occasional stumble. His men followed, their breaths labored, their loyalty a quiet thread. The trail emerged above the pass, the Persian camp a glow of torches below, their voices a murmur, unaware of the shadow creeping closer. Alexander signaled, his hands steady, the air thick with anticipation, and the Macedonians descended, their swords drawn, the surprise ablaze in the dark. Dawn broke as they struck, the clash of steel a sudden thunder, the Persians turning in confusion, their arrows flying wild. Alexander led the charge, his sword flashing, the ground slick with blood, the air filled with cries and the scent of iron. Below, the main force attacked, the phalanx a wall of spears, breaking the Persian line. Ariobarzanes fought, his armor dented, but fell, his body a heap among the rocks, the pass a graveyard of 20,000 souls. The victory was his, the gates opened, the path to Persia laid bare. The aftermath was quiet, the wind carrying the moans of the wounded, the dust settling on the fallen. Alexander walked among them, his cloak heavy with rain, his face solemn, the weight of command settling deeper. He ordered the dead buried, the air thick with the scent of earth and blood, and tended to the injured, his hands gentle, his voice soft. Rest now, brothers. The campfires flickered, their light a comfort, the army resting, their snores a lullaby against the mountain's hush. Darius fled, his chariot wheels a distant rumble, his empire cracking under the Macedonian advance. Alexander received the news by a stream, its waters cool against his hands, the reflection showing a king, not a boy. His companions cheered, their voices rising, but he remained still, the oracle's words echoing, son of Zeus. The palace of his mind expanded, the throne a light guiding him east, the Persian gates a first step or a path of conquest. The army moved on, the mountains giving way to rolling plains, the air warming with the scent of wildflowers. He rode Bucephalus, the horses stride sure, the bond a steady pulse. The men sang, their voices low, the tune a mix of Macedonian dirges and Persian melodies, a blend of cultures under his banner. The rain returned, a gentle patter, the ground soft under their feet, the sky a canopy of grey, a promise of more battles. Nights by the campfire were filled with tales. Ptolemy spoke of the gates, his voice a steady flow, the flames casting shadows on his face. Hephaestion laughed, his tone warm, recalling Alexander's climb, the risk a thread of glory. Alexander listened, his eyes on the fire, the crackle a rhythm, the stars above a map of his dreams. The army slept, their blankets rough against their skin, the air cool, the mountains a silent guard. The journey deepened his resolve. He trained with his men, the phalanx drills a dance of steel, the air thick with the clang of practice. A soldier stumbled, his shield dropping, and Alexander lifted it, his hands firm, his encouragement a quiet strength. The camp grew close, the bond of blood and battle a shield, the palace of Pella a fading echo, replaced by the field of his making. The rain ceased, the sky clearing, the stars a bright guide. Alexander lay in his tent, the canvas rustling, the blankets warm against his skin, his mind turning with plans. Persepolis, Susa, the heart of Persia. The stream murmured nearby, its rhythm a lullaby, the Persian gates a memory, the thunder of his destiny a promise. The world awaited, and he rested, the king of a growing empire, his breath a steady tide. Let's explore Chapter 6, Fire of Persepolis. The heart of the empire burns for the Alexander, the great, the thunder of the East series on Liam O'Connor Sleep Stories. This chapter will span 15-18 minutes to 0.002300 words at 130 words per minute, delivered with a smooth, soothing narrative to maintain the restful, captivating tone. The focus is on Alexander's capture and burning of Persepolis, a pivotal moment of triumph and destruction in his Persian campaign. The current date and time is 1:36 p.m. Cest, Wednesday, September 24, 2025, but the text will remain timeless. Sleep Story Chapter 6, Fire of Persepolis, the heart of the empire burns, duration, 15-18 minutes, 20,002,300 words. The sun dipped low over the Persian plains, casting a golden hue across the horizon. The air warm with the scent of wild sage and the distant murmur of the army. It was 330 BCE, and Alexander stood before Persepolis, the jewel of Darius' IIS empire, its towering columns rising like sentinels against the sky. The city gleamed, its marble palaces adorned with gold and lapis, a testament to Persian might, now trembling under the Macedonian advance. He dismounted Bucephalus, the horse's breath steady, his cloak brushing the ground, as the weight of conquest settled upon him. The palace of his dreams, now a battlefield of fire. The siege had ended days before, the walls breached after a relentless assault, the air thick with the clash of steel and the cries of the fallen. Alexander's phalanx had driven through, their spears a forest of bronze, the ground stained with blood, the defenders' resistance crumbling. The gates opened, the city surrendered, and the conqueror entered, his sandals echoing on the marble streets, the scent of incense and fear mingling in the breeze. The people knelt, their robes trailing, their eyes wide with awe and dread, as he claimed the heart of Persia, the palace of Darius a prize within reach. Persepolis was a marvel, its halls vast, the ceilings painted with scenes of kings and gods, the air cool with the breath of stone. Alexander walked its corridors, his companions at his side, Ptolemy's voice low with wonder, Hephaestion's hand on his sword. The treasury dazzled, gold coins spilling from chests, the clink of soft music, jewels glinting like stars. He sat on Darius' throne, the wood carved with lions, the cushion soft under him, the crown of Persia a shadow on his brow. The court watched, their breaths held, the silence a tribute to his power. Yet vengeance stirred. The Greeks remembered Xerxes' burning of Athens in 480 BCE, the temples reduced to ash, the memory a wound passed down. Alexander's men, fueled by wine and old grudges, demanded retribution, their voices rising in the feast halls, the air thick with the aroma of roasted meat. Olympias' letters, smudged with her urgency, urged him to erase the Persian past, her words a whisper in his mind. He hesitated, the palace's beauty a counterpoint to the rage, but the night grew wild, the torches flaring. The fire began as a spark, a torch tossed by a drunken soldier, its flame licking the tapestries. Alexander watched, his face illuminated, the decision a weight on his soul, as the blaze spread, the air filling with smoke and the crackle of wood. The palace burned, its columns crumbling, the gold melting into rivers, the screams of fleeing nobles a distant wail. The fire danced, a pyre of empire, the sky turning orange, the ground warm under his feet. He stood, Bucephalus at his side. The horses whinny a soft protest as Persepolis fell to ashes. The aftermath was a hush, the dawn revealing a city of ruins, the air heavy with the scent of charred stone and ash. Alexander walked among the debris, his cloak trailing, his eyes tracing the fallen columns, the silence a stark contrast to the night's fury. He ordered the treasury spared, the gold gathered, the clink of coins a steady rhythm, a wealth to fuel his march. The people emerged, their faces streaked with soot, their voices low, and he offered mercy, the air softening with their gratitude. His men rested, the campfires flickering, their blankets rough against their skin, the night cool after the blaze. Ptolemy spoke of the fire, his tone measured, the flames a symbol of Greek triumph, while Hephaestion sat silent, his gaze on Alexander, the bond tested by the night's choice. The king lay by the fire, the embers glowing, his mind turning with the weight of destruction, the palace of Persepolis a memory of glory and loss. The journey resumed, the plains stretching ahead, the air warming with the scent of spring grass. He rode Bucephalus, the horses stride a comfort, the bond a steady pulse. The army marched, their songs a mix of Macedonian chants and Persian tunes, the cultures blending under his banner. The rain returned, a gentle patter, the ground soft under their feet, the sky a canopy of grey, a promise of more to come. Nights by the campfire grew reflective. The soldiers spoke of Persepolis, their voices low, the firelight casting shadows on their faces. Alexander listened, his eyes on the flames, the crackle a rhythm, the stars above a map of his dreams. The army slept, their snores a soft chorus, the air cool, the ruins a silent witness. The fire's legacy lingered. He trained his men, the phalanx drills a dance of steel, the air thick with the clang of practice. A soldier fell, his cry sharp, and Alexander lifted him, his hands firm, his encouragement a quiet strength. The camp grew close, the bond of blood and battle a shield, the palace of his youth a fading echo, replaced by the field of his making. The rain ceased, the sky clearing, the stars a bright guide. Alexander lay in his tent, the canvas rustling, the blankets warm against his skin, his mind turning with plans Susa, Ecbatana, the heart of Persia. The wind murmured nearby, its rhythm a lullaby, the fire of Persepolis a memory, the thunder of his destiny a promise. The world awaited, and he rested, the king of a burning empire, his breath a steady tide. Let's delve into Chapter 7, the Indian frontier elephants and monsoons for the Alexander, the Great the Thunder of the East series on Liam O'Connor Sleep Stories. This chapter will span 15-18 minutes to 0.002300 words at 130 words per minute, delivered with a smooth, soothing narrative to maintain the restful, captivating tone. The focus is on Alexander's campaign in India, the battle against King Porus at the Hydaspes River, and the challenges of the monsoon, marking a turning point in his journey. The current date and time is 1:37 p.m. CEST, Wednesday, September 24, 2025, but the text will remain timeless. Sleep Story Chapter 7, The Indian Frontier Elephants and Monsoons, duration 15-18 minutes, 20,002,300 words. The sun rose over the lush plains of India, its light filtering through a canopy of mango trees, the air heavy with the scent of damp earth and blooming jasmine. It was 326 BCE, and Alexander led his weary army toward the Hydaspes River, its waters a silver ribbon winding through the green expanse. The Macedonian king rode Persepolis, his cloak damp from the morning mist, his eyes scanning the horizon where King Porus awaited, his army bolstered by towering war elephants. The ground softened under the army's boots, the distant rumble of thunder a promise of rain, as the frontier tested the limits of conquest. The journey had been long, the army crossing the Hindu Kush, its peaks a jagged wall, the air thin and cold against their skin. They descended into the Punjab, the land a mosaic of rice fields and villages, the people watching with weary eyes, their voices a soft murmur. Alexander pushed on, his phalanx a steady line, the clink of armor a rhythm, his men tired but loyal, their faces etched with dust and determination. The river loomed, its current swift, its banks lined with Perus forces, their banners fluttering, the elephants a wall of grey flesh and ivory. Porus stood tall, a giant of a man, his armor gleaming, his spear held high, commanding 30,000 infantry and 200 elephants. Alexander studied him from a hill, the grass cool under his sandals, the air thick with the scent of mud and anticipation. The Indian king's resolve was clear, his army a fortress, and the Macedonians murmured, their breaths shallow, the sight of the beasts a new challenge. Alexander planned, his mind a map, the river a barrier to overcome, the palace of his ambition a step closer. The battle began with a storm. Alexander feinted upstream, his cavalry splashing through shallow fords, the water cold against their legs, the sound of hooves a thunder. Porus followed, his elephants lumbering, their trunks raised, the ground trembling with each step. The rain fell, a sudden deluge, the sky darkening, the air alive with the patter of drops and the clash of steel. Alexander struck at night, his men crossing under cover, the river's roar masking their approach, the mud sucking at their boots. The charge was fierce. The phalanx met the Indian line, their spears piercing shields, the air filled with cries and the trumpeting of elephants. One beast charged, its tusks flashing, and a Macedonian fell, his scream sharp, the ground stained red. Alexander rallied, his sword flashing, his voice a steady call, guiding his men to target the elephant's legs. The beasts stumbling, their riders tumbling. Porus fought, his spear a blur, but the Macedonian cavalry flanked, their horses swift, the riverbank a chaos of blood and water. Victory came at dawn, the rain easing, the sky a soft grey. Porus surrendered, his armor dented, his face proud, And Alexander approached, the mud squelching under his feet. "Treat him as a king," he commanded, his voice firm, the air clearing with respect. Paris bowed, his men following, and the Macedonians cheered, their voices rising, the river a witness to a new alliance. The campfires flickered, their light a comfort, the army resting, their snores a lullaby against the damp. The monsoon followed, a relentless downpour, the plains turning to lakes, the air thick with humidity. The tent sagged, the canvas dripping, the ground a mire under their feet. Alexander walked among his men, the water soaking his cloak, his hands steadying a soldier's tent, the bond a quiet strength. The elephants, captured, trumpeted, their chains clinking, a reminder of the battle. The camp a mix of Macedonian and Indian voices, a blend of cultures under his command. Nights by the fire were restless. The rain pattered, a steady rhythm, the flames struggling against the damp. Ptolemy spoke of the elephants, his voice low, the fight a tale of wonder, while Hephaestion tended the wounded, his hands gentle. Alexander listened, his eyes on the fire, the crackle a faint note, the stars hidden, the monsoon a curtain around them. The army slept, their blankets sodden, the air cool, the river a constant murmur. The campaign faltered, the men grew weary, their feet blistered, their spirits dampened by the rain. They mutinied at the Hyphasis river, their voices rising, the air thick with their pleas. "Home, king, home." Alexander stood, the water lapping at his boots, his face set, the dream of conquering the Ganges fading. He wept, the tears lost in the rain, the palace of his mind a world unclaimed. The armies were a limit to his glory. He turned back, the retreat a quiet march, the plains stretching ahead, the air warming with the scent of wet grass. He rode Bucephalus, the horses stride a comfort, the bond a steady pulse. The men sang, their voices low, the tune a mix of Macedonian dirges and Indian melodies, a blend of cultures under his banner. The rain eased, the ground firming, the sky a canopy of hope, a promise of rest. The camp grew close, the bond of blood and battle a shield. He trained with his men, the phalanx drills a dance of steel, the air thick with the clang of practice. A soldier stumbled, his shield dropping, and Alexander lifted it, his hands firm, his encouragement a quiet strength. The palace of Pella was a memory, the frontier a testament to his reach. The monsoon a chapter closed, the rain ceased, the sky clearing, the stars a bright guide. Alexander lay in his tent, the canvas dry, the blankets warm against his skin, his mind turning with plans homeward. Then Persia's remnants, the river murmured nearby, its rhythm a lullaby, the Indian frontier a memory, the thunder of his destiny a promise. The world awaited, and he rested, the king of a vast empire, his breath a steady tide. The morning sun filtered through the thinning clouds over the Punjab, its light warming the damp earth, the air carrying the scent of wet grass and the faint tang of smoke. It was late 326 BCE, and Alexander led his army on the long retreat from India, the high-despiced river a fading memory behind them. He rode Bucephalus, his cloak swaying gently, his eyes on the horizon where the Hindu Kush loomed, a reminder of the journey ahead. The ground softened under the army's boots, the clink of armor a steady pulse, as the war machine he had forged moved with purpose, its heart the phalanx and the loyalty of his companions. The phalanx was his creation, a wall of steel honed by Philip's design and sharpened by his own genius. 16-foot sarissas gleamed, their tips a forest of bronze, held by men in locked shields, their steps synchronized, the air thick with the rhythm of their march. He trained them daily, the dust rising, the clash of practice a soft thunder, his voice guiding, "Hold the line, brothers." A soldier stumbled, his shield slipping, and Alexander steadied him, his hands firm, the bond a quiet strength. The camp grew close, the phalanx a family, their snores a lullaby under the stars. His companions were the soul of the machine. Ptolemy, broad-shouldered and thoughtful, led the shield-bearers, his voice calming counsel, the air filled with the scent of his leather armor. Hephaestion, his closest friend, rode beside him, his laughter warm, his hand on his sword a comfort, the bond a thread of youth unbroken by war. Craterus, stern and loyal, commanded the rearguard, his commands crisp, the ground trembling under his men's march. These men, forged in battle, were his pillars, their voices a chorus by the campfire, the flames casting shadows on their faces. The retreat tested them. The monsoon had softened the land, the rivers swollen, the air heavy with humidity. They built rafts, the wood creaking under their hands, the water cool against their legs, crossing the Aesanines and Hydaspes, the current swift, the logs bobbing. Alexander stood at the helm, his cloak soaked, his gaze steady, guiding them through. The armies trust a shield. A raft overturned, a soldier's cry sharp, and he dove in, the water cold, pulling the man to safety. The camp cheering, their voices a wave of relief. Bucephalus faltered, his strength waning, the heat and marches taking toll. Alexander tended him, the horse's mane soft under his fingers, the stable air warm with hay. "Rest, my friend," he murmured, the bond a silent pact, the horse's eyes trusting. The army mourned when Bucephalus fell, his body buried with honor, the ground soft under a marker, and Alexander named a city Bucephala in his memory, the air filled with the scent of freshly turned earth. The war machine adapted. He integrated Indian troops, their curved swords a new rhythm, the air thick with the clang of their drills. The phalanx drilled with them, the spears weaving with sabers, a blend of cultures under his command. A young Indian archer joined, his bowstring taut, his aim true, and Alexander praised him, the camp's firelight a witness, the bond a bridge across lands. Nights by the campfire grew reflective. The men spoke of India, their voices low, the flames dancing, the stars a canopy above. Ptolemy recounted the elephants, his tone measured, the battle a tale of awe, while Ephesian teased Alexander's swim, his laughter a comfort. The king listened, his eyes on the fire, the crackle a rhythm, the retreat a chapter of endurance. The journey continued, the plains giving way to rocky hills, the air cooling with the scent of pine. He rode a new horse, its stride less familiar, the bond a work in progress. The men sang, their voices soft, the tune a mix of Macedonian chants and Indian melodies, a harmony of unity. The rain returned, a gentle patter, the ground firming, the sky a soft grey, a promise of home. Training resumed, the phalanx a dance of steel, the air thick with the clang of practice. A soldier fell, his cry sharp, and Alexander lifted him, his hands steady, his encouragement a quiet strength. The camp grew stronger, the war machine a living entity, the palace of Pella a distant echo, replaced by the field of his forging. The retreat reached the Jedrosian desert, the sand stretching endless, the air dry and biting. The army marched, the heat a relentless foe, the ground burning under their feet. Alexander led, the water scarce, his cloak heavy with sweat, sharing his ration, the bond a lifeline. A soldier collapsed, his breath ragged, and the king carried him, the sand shifting, the camp's gratitude a quiet tide. The desert nights were cold, the stars a bright guide, their light reflecting on the dunes. He lay in his tent, the canvas rustling, the blankets rough against his skin, his mind turning with plans Persia's remnants, a return to Babylon. The wind murmured nearby, its rhythm a lullaby, the war machine a testament to his will. The world awaited, and he rested, the king of a vast empire, his breath a steady tide. The evening sun dipped below the horizon of Babylon, its light fading into a soft purple, the air warm with the scent of date palms and the distant murmur of the Euphrates. It was 323 BCE, and Alexander sat in the palace of Nebuchadnezzar, its marble halls echoing with the footsteps of his companions, his crown heavy on his brow. At 32, he was a king transformed, his golden hair streaked with dust, his eyes carrying the weight of a world conquered, yet shadowed by whispers of divinity. The ground felt firm under his sandals, the palace a testament to his reach, as the line between God and man blurred in the twilight. The claim began in Egypt, the oracle of Cyrus' words a seed, "You are my son," growing into a crown of divine right. In Persia, he adopted the proskynesis, the Persian bow, his courtiers kneeling, their robes brushing the floor, the air thick with incense. The Macedonians resisted, their voices low, their pride stung, and he relented, the palace of his mind a battlefield of cultures. Olympias wrote, her ink smudged, urging him to embrace Zeus' blood. Her words a whisper in his ear, while his men grumbled, the campfires flickering with dissent. He pushed the divine image further. In Ecbatana, he held feasts, the tables laden with gold platters, the air filled with the aroma of spiced lamb, the wine flowing like rivers. He wore Persian robes, the silk soft against his skin, his diadem glinting, demanding respect as a god-king. Hephaestion, his closest friend, supported him, his laughter warm, his hand steady, the bond a shield against doubt. But Craterus, stern and traditional, spoke against it, his voice a rumble, the tension a thread in the whole. The army grew restless. The retreat from India had worn them, their feet blistered, their spirits dampened by the monsoon, and the divine claims fueled their unease. Alexander trained them, the phalanx drills a dance of steel, the air thick with the clang of practice, his commands crisp. A soldier fell, his cry sharp, and he lifted him, his hands firm, his encouragement a quiet strength, the camp's loyalty a fragile thread. The palace of his youth faded, replaced by the field of his making, the war machine a reflection of his will. Illness struck in Babylon, the air grew heavy, the scent of sickness mingling with the river's breath. He fell ill after a feast, the wine bitter on his tongue, the whole spinning, the courtiers' faces blurring. The physicians hovered, their hands trembling, their voices low, diagnosing fever, perhaps poison, the rumors swirling like dust. He lay in his bed, the blankets rough against his skin, his breath labored, the palace a silent witness to his decline. His companions gathered, their faces etched with worrying. Ptolemy sat by his side, his voice steady, recounting battles, the air thick with memory. Hephaestion held his hand, the bond a lifeline, his tears silent, the room dim with the flicker of lamps. Craterus stood apart, his gaze hard, the tension unresolved. Alexander spoke, his voice weak, to the strongest, a whisper lost in the stillness, the throne's succession a shadow on the marble. The nights deepened, the stars peeking through the windows, their light a faint guide. He drifted, his mind turning with dreams Persia's fall, India's rivers, a world unclaimed. The Euphrates murmured outside, its rhythm a lullaby, the palace a cradle of his end. His men filed past, their footsteps soft, their faces wet, the air filled with the scent of grief, the war machine stilled by his breath. He died on the 10th day, his body still, the room silent, the lamps burning low. The physicians embalmed him, the air thick with the scent of myrrh and honey, his body placed in a gold coffin, the palace a tomb of glory. The army mourned, their voices rising, the ground trembling with their sorrow, the campfires extinguished, the night a shroud. The legacy lingered, the companions divided the empire, the Diadochi rising, their ambitions a new storm. Alexander's divinity was sealed, the stories growing, the air filled with tales of a god-king. The palace of Babylon stood, its halls echoing with his name, the thunder of his destiny a memory. The stars shone, the river flowed, and the world rested, the king's breath a whisper in the wind. The night settled over the ancient world, the stars a vast canopy above the ruins of Babylon, the air cool with the scent of the Euphrates and the faint whisper of history. It was 323 BCE, and Alexander's death marked the end of a reign that spanned from Macedon to India, his empire a mosaic of conquests, now fracturing under the Diadochi. The palace stood silent, its marble halls empty, the echo of his footsteps a ghost in the stillness, as the world he shaped lingered in the quiet. His empire stretched 5 million square kilometers, a realm of mountains and deserts, rivers and cities, united by the Sarissa and the dream of a single king. The Diadochi Ptolemy in Egypt, Seleucus in Persia, Antigonus in Macedon carved it up, their wars a new thunder, the air thick with the clash of their ambitions. Alexandria rose, its library a beacon, the scent of papyrus and Inca legacy, while Greek culture blended with Persian and Indian, a Hellenistic dawn. The course was steep, historians whisper of 100,000 dead at Tyre, 1,000,000 across Asia, the ground stained with blood, the cities raised Persepolis a pyre, Thebes a ruin. His men, 40,000 strong at the start, dwindled, their bones scattered from the Hindu Kush to the Jedrosian desert, the air heavy with their sacrifice. Yet trade flourished, the Silk Road a lifeline, merchants safe under his patrols, their caravans a pulse of silk and spice, the Pax Alexandrina a brief peace. His blood endures. Genetic studies trace millions to his line, his seed sown across conquered lands, a living testament to his march. The phalanx inspired Rome, its formations echoing in legions, while his tolerance shaped the Seleucids and Ptolemies, their courts a blend of faiths. Bucephala, named for his horse, stood as a city, its walls a memory, the air filled with the scent of its fields. The myths grew. Plutarch and Arrian wrote, their scrolls worn, their words painting him as Zeus' son, the oracle of Cyrus' voice a divine echo. The Romans revered him, their generals studying his campaigns, the air thick with his name. Yet doubts lingered, was he a man drunk on power, his divinity a mask for ambition? The palace of his mind, a world of glory, left questions unanswered. His companions faded. Hephaestion's death in 324 BCE broke him, the pyre in Ecbatana, a blaze of grief, the air heavy with smoke. Ptolemy ruled Egypt, his dynasty aligned to Cleopatra, the Nile a witness. The Diadochus wars raged, their thrones unstable, the empire a shadow of his dream, the ground trembling with their strife. The night deepened, the stars a guide, their light reflecting on the ruins. A traveller paused by Babylon, the wind carrying the scent of dust and memory, and murmured, the king's thunder lives. The Euphrates flowed, its rhythm a lullaby, the palace a silhouette, the world remade by a boy from Pella. Alexander's echo lingered, a conqueror, a visionary, a man whose shadow stretched across time. The stars watched, the river sang, and the earth held his name, a legacy carved in stone and blood, a restful hush over the ancient night.